Okay, so I'd like to start by welcoming all of you. Thank you for joining us this morning whilst we discuss a very important topic. Before we go into it, I'd like to introduce myself formally. My name is Anita Riafi Esino. I'm the CEO of OML Africa. I'm also an international HR industrial relations expert, certified ILO trainer, and also a mediator and arbitrator for the National Labour Commission of Ghana. In a moment, I'll ask Gabriella Crampton, who is the Managing Director of PMR Residence, to introduce herself, but she will be the other speaker on this topic, and I'll get her to introduce herself in a moment. For those of you engaging with our webinar series for the first time, I'll just give you a very brief about OML Africa. We are an international strategic core HR management consultancy working in Ghana and in the UK and Europe. We work across sectors in Ghana and African-wide. We're a team of consultants with a number of years' experience. We've worked hard over the years to try and fuse our local and international expertise in order to ensure we bring the best in HR compliance and good practice. Generally, we're very passionate about HR. We've been championing local content for the continent and a whole heap of things regarding the industry over the years since we've been in Africa. We've been in Africa for the past 10 years. This year will be our 10th year. So welcome if you're engaging with us for the first time. Specifically moving into the area of COVID-19. Of course, COVID-19 has hit the world globally and it's come with a lot of challenges for employers and HR practitioners. So we decided that we were going to take up the area of workplace response to COVID-19, and we decided to do this through a number of ways, one of which is the webinar series. In our webinar series, we do have the on-demand ones that are the ones that are paid. Otherwise, a lot of our practice ones are unpaid. And the idea of the webinars is to actually focus on Africa and talk about these issues facing us, looking at it from our perspective. It's not that there aren't commonalities in terms of the things that are happening, but there are other factors that affect us that doesn't necessarily affect or even is an issue to the developed nations. And I also think that it's important when issues are happening that we begin to look at it from our perspective as well as having the global perspective. So for that reason, our workplace response, yes, we'll talk about all the standards and international elements, but definitely we are very focused on looking at some of the issues that are directly affecting us on the continent. Amid this as well, a lot of our work, because we are a core HR consultancy, we're doing a lot of work on advisory, supporting a lot of our clients in relation to advisory services on contracts, variations, redundancies, and union negotiations and so forth. Additionally, there are also organizations without HR support, even adding capacity to the HR, who we also providing interim support services to, as well as support with business continuity strategies, which I'm sure some of you who are managing it can see what a nightmare it is at the moment. From it just keeps changing and so on. So we're doing a lot of work around business continuity as well. And then, of course, we know post-COVID, we have a lot of issues around policies, documents, contracts, and things, which we intend to do a whole post-COVID exercise to really look at the areas that the HR needs to pick up, and HR has a lot of work to do in. And then, of course, being a mediator and arbitrator for the National Labour Commission, we also tend to do a lot of dispute service work as well. So I hope this is at least giving you some insights if it's the first time you're engaging with OML Africa on what we do. So when it comes to the HR in practice, you know, I as a professional and as a consultant are very passionate about it. Those of you who know me know. And we always try to bring you good quality information in the best way that we can. So if you're engaging the first time, we hope it won't be the last time. We hope you keep coming to engage and to pick insights from other experts as well. Okay, so now I'd like to move over and ask Gabby to introduce herself and then maybe tell us a little bit about her and what she does.
Great, Anita, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You did a bit of an introduction there. Um, but let me just say a little about myself. I am a human resources practitioner. I have been running PMR for some time now, but though I'm a human resources practitioner, I have a lot of passion for recruitment and doing recruitment right. And so in past ventures that I've had, I've focused on recruitment services primarily, but I also do other human resources services. At PMR, PMR is a boutique HR consulting firm. The work we do is very tailored to our clients, so we spend time understanding our clients' needs before we deliver our solutions. So we do talent placements, outsourcing, compensation and benefits, with a lot of focus on research, surveys, payroll management, and salary structuring. And we do team building facilitation as well. We work with a team of consultants who have over 20 years experience altogether. I am also an ILO certified trainer with Anita as well. So that's a bit about me. Anita, shall we go straight into?
Yes, thank you, Gabby. So we hope we've reassured you that we are knowledgeable on the subjects that we're about to talk about. You are in very good hands. Okay, so we're going to move on. And just to let you know the areas that we want to be covering around this issue around talent. Managing talent has become a big deal. I mean, I know one of the key areas of focus is around contracts, variations, and all the issues that are there, but actually managing the talent is also another big issue for us that we have to get right, because this issue with the COVID-19 eventually will subside and we'll have to go back to what is being termed as the new normal. And what we don't want to have is to have gotten into the situation where we've not taken into account some of the key issues we're going to discuss. And we hope to get from you as well through your questions and your comments and so on around the talent managing. In fact, I know that when I was talking about this with some other people, and I was like, oh, I'm looking at doing something on the talent. Some of the comments were like, oh, but all recruitment has stopped and all that. I was like, talent management is not about recruitment alone. There's a whole factors that needs to be looked at. We're talking about managing your workforce during COVID-19 and the issues that surround that as practitioners we have found ourselves facing. So that is what we want to look through. So we're going to start by looking at acquisition. Of course, recruitment, there are issues around there and lots of things to talk about in relation to talent pool, in relation to selections, assessments, etc., that you do need to think about, because for the first time ever, everything we're doing around our workforce, we have to really be sure about it. So our traditional ways have to be adjusted in order to make sure that the decisions we make are the right ones. All right. And then we also need to look at the whole idea around the talent and managing it around redundancies and those who are left behind, this whole idea of working from home and so on. And as we begin to talk about these issues, you realize that other issues will come up. I mean, we've just kind of summarized the points, but it's quite intricate. And we do have to look at this because it is a big deal in terms of the impact on our bottom line. Okay, so before we start, just to say that we're hoping that by the time we finish this, we would have given at least a good pointers out there for you to consider in a way in which you're managing your workforce. And we're hoping that you'll be able to manage them effectively, meaning in this short term that we're in this COVID-19, the challenges around talent, at least we'll raise some and it will help you. We're hoping that you'll get some different strategies that you can apply in relation to managing your workers. Also a bit more on your employer brands, because we know that that's somewhere where sometimes we're not really tapping into the benefits of our employer brand, and Gabby will touch on that to see how we can use that. And then of course, that we cannot talk about these issues. I don't think we can talk about any issue at the moment regarding the HR without technology being elements coming in. So we're going to look at the technology specifically towards this particular topic. Okay, so before we start, just to bring us all onto the same page as to why we're even having this conversation, is that we have this COVID-19, this virus that has been declared as a pandemic by the World Health Organization that is affecting all countries, with exception of very few globally. And specifically, just so that we are focused, we are looking at it from the workplace response, the workplace impact. So in which case, we're looking at it from the impact on employers. And when we looked at what is happening, we curated it into 4 areas. That is, meaning these 4 areas is affecting all companies, all employers, all HR people globally. The first is the whole issue of business continuity, where we are having to continue the business, save jobs, and manage all the issues without, in as far as possible, having to completely shut down our businesses. Okay. Now, this business continuity is having lots of impact. We are looking at it from the human capital element, but it's having impact on the bottom line in terms of finances and so on. And under the business continuity, the lockdowns, whether it's partial or full, is what is what is creating the impact, because businesses are not running fully, or they are, and due to that, it's having an impact on their bottom line. So this has led to a whole heap of problems. Then we have the work environment changes. Those occupational roles that can work from home have gone home. But we didn't really have a lot of time, unless it was already your practice, to plan for working from home. So now we have a whole heap of challenges and as well as opportunities that we have to now manage. So the work environment has now divided into the workplace and then the working remotely from home. So we have a whole heap. And then even under that, we now have all of the other requirements that we have to do, which comes under the 3rd point, which is the occupational health. The 2nd point is the terms and conditions of employment. All over, all employers are now having to look at contracts of employment or collective agreements where they have unions. And the fact of the matter is, we have to vary these contracts because none of us wrote contracts anticipating pandemics. So that has also brought another huge challenge amidst this managing talent issue around salaries, layoffs, redundancies, reducing hours, a whole heap of stuff. And the one thing that is most employers are all worried about is that at the end of all this, am I going to have lots of litigation brought against me for having to vary contracts and whatnot? We say no if you follow the appropriate due diligence. So we have terms and conditions of employment. Then we also have occupational health and safety environment. Now already we have laws that tells us things to do. So we already have mandatory, by default, occupational health practices we should be practicing in our workplaces already. However, COVID-19 has also brought us preventative measures in the workplace. This is the washing of hands, sanitize, all these new things we have to do in order to stop the spread, all right? So we now have to implement these and fund these in our workplaces and ensure that our workers are safe. And then we also have the personal protective equipment. Some institutions, this may not be an addition, but if you are operating in the health sector, you now need additional PPEs suitable for if you're a clinic, if you're providing anything to do with the front line, you now need to make sure you have appropriate PPEs for your employees to ensure that they are safe. You may even not necessarily even be in the health, but you may realize by the nature of the job some of your employees do in terms of having contact with customers and so on, you may have to enhance the PPEs that for them in order to keep them safe. So we have these additional things added to our already existing occupational health, safety, and environment. And then lastly, we have wellness. Now, wellness, we already have strategies in place dealing with wellness, whether it's psychological, whether it's health, physical, gyms, and we have loads of activities. All of you will have some element in your organization. However, COVID-19 has brought us self-isolation and quarantine and contact tracing, where we've identified employees in the workplace who have been contaminated. So now we have to think about wellness. And the wellness issue here we're thinking about is the psychological impact, is the being able to support the employees when they are in self-isolation or they've been quarantined. So that's another area that we weren't necessarily, we all do it at different levels, but in this instance, in the COVID-19, you have to have a plan for. All right. So these are the 4 core areas of challenge and we also argue opportunity for the HR and the employer to address. Okay. So for us today, we are looking at the talent management, managing talent amidst all of these issues I've just mentioned to you. So in starting, I'm going to roll over to Gabby to start us off in the discussions around talent acquisition, and then we carry on from there. So over to you, Gabby.
Okay, thank you, Anita. Thank you for that introduction. And I think that we're now poised to get into this subject very well. Now, the coronavirus situation is very new to all of us, at least most of us in our lifetimes. We haven't come across a pandemic of this nature. And so it's very, very difficult to predict its effects. I mean, a lot of the studies and a lot of the information coming out of coronavirus has been very, very dynamic. So then what's in it, or how does that impact on our operations, particularly for HR and also for the hiring of staff? It becomes very difficult for us to map out our hiring needs, now and also a few months from now. Now, there are some organizations who have immediately put a freeze on hiring during this pandemic. There are also others who may not have been extremely impacted. If you look at some industries like manufacturing or probably delivery services, serving some of us who are working from home, they have seen rather a surge in recruitment, a surge. They need to hire more people. If you look at health services, they need more hands on deck to help us or to help fight this pandemic. And so, in the spirit of optimism, I mean, there have been a lot of changes. As I speak about those who have seen a surge in the operations and business, there are also the obvious industries who have been heavily impacted. So we can talk about the airline industry, we can talk about hospitality. They have seen extreme impact. So, I mean, as we look at these two categories of industries, it's also important to say that we will come out of the pandemic. Coronavirus is not going to be with us forever, so we're going to be optimistic and say that yes, we will come out of it. But what happens when we come out of it? What happens when everything suddenly we all embrace this new normal, or there is very minimal risk of coronavirus infections amongst us, and we return back to work? Immediately, we will see a surge in recruitments. We would have to start recruiting en masse. And at that point, the actions that we've taken now would heavily impact on the results we get then. So that leads us to question ourselves on why we need to strategize for talent acquisition at this time. It seems like a very odd thing to do when everyone is sort of playing safe and putting a freeze on recruitment. But like I said earlier, if you don't act now, a few months down the line, you're going to be found wanting. We all know that most organizations would probably use this period to lay off some poor performers. I'll come to this point, the first point, in a bit. But some organizations may use this period to lay off, some poor performers. This is a fact that we can't run away from. If they do that, it means that they have positioned themselves, or they have allowed room to take on board new talent. And that's where we come in. If during your layoffs, you unfortunately lose some valued staff, some critical staff or high performers, you need to understand that your competition is there waiting to take on board your high performers. That immediately puts them in a position to, it puts them in an advantageous position in your market. So it's important for us to strategize. Now, during our layoffs, when we do lose these high performers, how do we manage them? Do we just let them go? How do we engage them? Now, we'll also see a high volume in recruitment for essential work during this period. I think I've talked about that. And even post-COVID. And so we need to be ready for that. COVID has also brought on board a need for digitalization. If we all know the nature of this virus, the less contacts we have with people, the better. And so we know how recruitment is. It's a very people activity, people-oriented activity. We speak to people, we touch, we shake hands. Someone's firm handshake can give you an indication of, their personality. We make a lot of inferences from the one-on-one interactions we have with them. Now we're saying that all of that, or most aspects of that, are now being taken away. How do we still engage potential candidates? How do we engage our talent pool without compromising on the effectiveness of our recruitment process? So digitalization now becomes key for us as talent leaders and as recruiters. Jobs will evolve. Now, if we look at how most organizations are operating now, for the past 3 to 4 weeks, or even a bit more, for most organizations in Europe, most people are working from home. So it is giving us the indication that some jobs can be effectively performed off-site. So these jobs have changed. And gradually, as we go through this, we would realize that the requirements for the jobs will change. The skills for these jobs will change. Now, if we don't strategize our talents, our position, we won't be able to identify and appropriately address this change. Let's take working from home, for instance. If this becomes a norm for at least the next few months, which is almost, we need to look at some of the challenges that the staff face when they're working from home. Do they have a good environment to work from? Do they have the infrastructure and the equipment? Let's get very basic here. Some people probably do not have furniture that is fit for purpose to work effectively. And we're asking them to deliver certain results for us. So what role do we play in making sure that these jobs are being carried out effectively? Or when we're bringing people in, the people we bring in are able to carry out the jobs as we expect them to. Flexi hours or flexi working. the staff who have children, who may not always be able to work within the 8 to 5, and even not just staff who have children, staff with other challenges at home. They may not be able to work between the 8 to 5. How do we manage that? How do we bring all of these things to mind when we are strategizing for talent or to acquire talent? The evolution of jobs will then force us to look at the types of contracts that we have now for certain roles. And I think that Anita will expand on this when we look at talent management later, but if you look at the types of contract now, a lot of companies have had to look at their contracts again, the terms and conditions, because we haven't had a pandemic this size. Sometimes we have or we make the mistake of glossing over contracts. We issue just one format of contract for everyone. This is the time for us to categorize and look at the types of contracts to issue for certain roles and look at the content of the contracts themselves. How do the contracts protect us as employers and also protect the employee in the event of a pandemic like this? You also realize that there will be several calls for budget cuts. It's normal. A lot of revenue is going to making sure that employees are safe. A lot of changes are happening. Business isn't running as projected, or revenue is not coming in as projected. So there'll be a lot of budget cuts. And usually one of the areas that we rush to would be hiring budgets. But this is a very dangerous thing. And if we don't have a good strategy, what's going to happen is that we're going to cut down on our hiring budgets, and then we would increase our exposure during the hiring process, bringing on board staff who are not fit for purpose. And that is eventually going to cost us more, usually between, in the first couple of months or during the probation period. So if we don't strategize well, these hiring budget cuts will occur immediately. And even if they're occurring, how are we channeling what we have to get the best results?
Yeah. I just wanted to, when you were talking, I made some points under each of these just to add to what you just said. So like if we take like, for example, the whole layoff, most of the layoff we're seeing as a way to manage not to lose our good staff. And we're using it also as a way to avoid redundancies in as far as possible. And we know that a lot of it is also happening because of financials. So a lot of the layoffs are unpaid, okay? Now, when we lay off people, the contractual terms still stand. So, i.e., they cannot go and work for somebody else. And that has to you have to make sure that is in your whichever agreement or confirmation letter, etc., that you may send, that reservation is there, or reminded them, because that should have been part of their employment contract. But it doesn't, because when they are on layoff, they are still employees of the company, which is why the grounds for not being able to work for other companies still stands. However, just to go back to the point Gabby made about your competitors using this opportunity to clear out non-performers or chaffs, or however we're terming them at the moment, in order to make room to maybe rehire higher performers or better candidates. It means that, if I'm just giving a scenario of if I'm on unpaid layoff, and then of course, like we said, it's not everybody that has frozen their recruitment. And the strategies we're talking about, we are saying that you should be building your pool. So assuming that your competitor is building their pool, and then I get to find out, and I take my CV, and actually I'm selected. Okay, in fact, we would like to talk to you, and they do, and it's actually, we'd like to offer you a job, and we can start. We will let you know, and I decide to go for. all I have to do is resign and go to your competitor. All right. So that clause of I cannot work for somebody will only apply when I am under your layoff and I'm still your employee. But if an opportunity comes, we have to remember that they can still resign and go somewhere else. All right. That's very important. So some of my clients, what we've been doing for the top performers, and we determine top performance by the consistent performance of these candidates. Some of them we look at 3 years, some of them we've looked at 5 years, and we are like, we can't lose this talent. So what we've done is that even though they've been laid off, an agreement has been negotiated where they're being paid at least some kind of basic allowance in order to retain them and maintain that loyalty and commitment. So that may be something you have to think about. So for your high performers, it may not be good enough if you for you to just have them on unpaid layoffs. So it's something to think about. I mean, that's why we're having this conversation. If you don't want to lose them, but you may also be in a position where you can't do that and you have to take that risk of potentially losing them. But that's just the point that came out when Gabby said. Yeah. And then the working from home, the other thing that came into mind is that we have to be real that it is not I don't believe that the minute we start moving into post-COVID, into this new normal, every employer is going to be implementing working from home. I believe that for working from home to become another workplace option for companies is going to really be how productive or what the outcome has been during COVID-19 in terms of how they've been able to manage it. That's one. And the second thing is there is a cost attached to working from home. It's not just a matter of people working from home. There's an infrastructural that has to be in, laptops, units, and all of those things have to be in. And when we go into post-COVID, we know that a lot of employers are going to be working a lean budget because they've lost so much revenue. So working from home may not necessarily be a priority for all organizations or even an option. I think it's probably an option for many because of the situation we are in. And I think even if others are going to move into it, they're going to now go and reflect on it deeper to see how it would work in the long term, because it's not as simple as is being put out there. If you were already doing it, you don't see the problem. But if you weren't, and some of you would have embraced it now, you realize that it's not as smooth and it needs a lot of work, but it's definitely an option. But there will be some slow to transition, and not everyone is necessarily going to adopt it the way that it's being put out there. It really does depend on the bottom line as well. And then there's the whole monitoring of people working from home, the whole, productivity, and the whole resource, the focus commitment is all an issue. Gabby mentioned about those with parents. We've known from monitoring and asking those who are working from home. That's been one of the challenges. Sometimes even the laptops that the parents maybe it's even been assigned by the employer is what the kids are using for their classroom sessions. So those timing, the working hours are clashing. This is something unique to us. Not every company could have distributed laptops for their employees to work from home. So they may have asked, if you have one, can you use it? And then maybe they have implemented the necessary securities on them. So that's another issue. The whole productivity issue is a very key issue in terms of results. Then we come to the type of contracts that she mentioned. And here is, I feel what COVID has done in terms of managing our talent, the way that we've been doing is a lot of, in Africa, we're very much on permanent staff or fixed term or casuals. But what this has done is having to force us to now look at other options like part-timers, like piece by piece, like self-employed models, because when this situation happened, we have found ourselves under terms and conditions in a regimented situation where we are struggling to have flexibility to change terms. So that means we have to look at how we are going to manage talent to feel they have a job security, but also be able to maneuver when we find ourselves in this type of situation. So we're going to have to look at the way the types of contracts we are issuing and the contents of these contracts is going to become a very key in managing the talent, because talent obviously wants to know that they're secure in their jobs and so on. So we're going to have to offer different options as well, because we've got to think, we have to understand and accept, as we've been told, that pandemics are with us. This will not be the last pandemic. So we have to now, moving forward, look at even the way we're managing our contracts in relation to our talent. And as for hiring budget, Gabby is right. Definitely there's going to be cuts. And I believe it's also going to be more focused in terms of how we are spending. And I believe that elements of that is going to also come under policy, because now as practitioners, we are going to have that KPI of reducing cost in recruitment is going to become a very needed requirement. We now have to look at how we're going to recruit using technology to reduce costs. So if you were not doing it before, you now have to see how you're going to cut costs, because you may not have the option of boards or agencies and so on. So it's forcing us to have to get creative in how we bring our hiring budgets down, but at the same time making sure that we meet the needs and the demands of our companies. And how we recruit, definitely, I believe, I agree with Gabby, we're going to have to review it, and I believe technology, if you haven't already been influenced, is going to play a very key role in this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely right. So I think that you went into the policy reviews regarding recruitment and probation. Yeah, if all these changes occur, we cannot still maintain what we have in our policy handbooks. I know sometimes we don't even review them, and so this is the time for us to look at them and make sure that those are also fit for purpose and they're fit for the times that we're in now.
exactly.
Okay. So I want us to look at, or I would look at the talent acquisition strategy in threefold. So there's the aspect of building and managing a quality talent pool. We'll be looking at reviewing and updating our selection processes and also the onboarding process. Okay, Anita, can we go on to the next slide, please? Now, during this period, it's absolutely essential for us to build a solid talent pool. You know, sometimes when we've got, or we're in the motion of running business, running usual operations, we forget to build a pool. And what happens when we're in need of, or we need to fill a role? We start running helter-skelter. At the end of the day, there isn't a lot of thought. There isn't a lot of thought, or we are unable to recruit with intention. I would say that, because you haven't built a good pool. When your pool is weak, obviously the outcome will not be great either. So this is the time for us to focus on building a good pool. And how do we do that? Now, Anita mentioned employer branding briefly. I think that the COVID pandemic has positioned most organizations to take advantage of employer branding, even though it doesn't sound too great, but there are so many things that we can do at this time to position ourselves as employers of choice. A lot of candidates are joining companies not because of, yes, money is a factor, but it's not really the main reason. If you look at most millennials, the reason why they would join a company is to make impact and to feel that they are contributing to something bigger, something larger, contributing to the bigger picture. And usually it comes in the form of things like charities, CSR. So during this period, as a company or as employers, we need to respond to COVID. How we respond to COVID would give a certain, would project us in a certain light. What are we doing as citizens? Are we giving back to the communities? Even if it's the area around you, how are we supporting them? Are we helping them with sanitizers, masks, some of the preventative measures that most people can't afford or some people can't afford? How is your organization responding to that? Moving from the areas around us, let's look inwardly. How are we supporting our staff? Remember, we still have people we work with. Now, are staff coming to work in fear that they might get infections? Have we put in place the right measures? If you come to the workplace, do we have water? Do we have sanitizers? Are we ensuring that we're doing social distancing and all that? When our staff come in, do they feel confident and safe to work? How have we managed our headcount reduction process? So that's where we look at your redundancies and layoffs, how you've managed those. If you had to lay a certain number of your staff off, either temporarily, or if you had to make them redundant permanently, how was that process managed? Was it fair? Because the fact that COVID is with us now, and the fact that COVID is a pandemic, doesn't mean that we have to ignore the processes required to undertake a layoff or a redundancy. Are we using certain measures to unfairly terminate people? Now, the employer branding is so strong that most candidates and the talents that you're targeting are going to make decisions on how you're projected in either within social media, or what kind of values you imbibe as a company. Your internal staff acts as ambassadors for you. So if your staff are unsafe, if they don't feel confident coming to work, they're going to go out and say, well, I'm just going to work because I need to get by, but this is not a place I want to work. I don't feel safe. I'm always afraid that every time I go to work, I'm going to come back home with a COVID infection, or put the rest of my family at risk. This does not put your company in a good light. And so these sort of things can either propel your talent acquisition efforts, or it can thwart them. So it's important for us to look at the employer branding, particularly with measures related to COVID. Anita, do you have anything you want to add to employer branding?
Yeah, I wanted to add on the other side of what you were saying. For me, I believe that HR, if it's not already doing, for the first time, we are put in a situation where in the employer branding, we have to look at it, because insofar as we know there's going to be a lot of people unemployed, we still want to attract the good candidates. And therefore, we have to begin to look at how we're putting our brand out there. I mean, you go to many companies' websites, and there's nothing even on careers. Are you with me? If we're talking about building a talent pool now, you should have a page on your company website that talks about careers, what you have to offer, that even gives either, whether it's a portal, whether it's an email address, for people to send their CVs to you, which you now begin to put into your pool. Now you have to also be speaking to marketing to be part of their strategy for the social media platforms, where now if attracting people is not just having a careers page on the website, it's also how you are showing people what it's like to work for your company. So now Instagram, Facebook become, even LinkedIn become an ideal scenario to be sharing what is happening there. So if HR has not been using those channels to promote the employer brand, this will be the time to start thinking about it, because now when people are looking for a job, and this is not just to the millennials, even some of us, You are trying to understand what the company culture, what is going on. And I'm telling you, I believe in post-COVID, that's going to become very important to people because of what Gabby said, maybe how they were treated by their previous company. Now going into another company, they want to see exactly, you know, what is the culture, what are they saying about how it's like to work there. And this is an opportunity for you to come up with a strategy to promote your employer brand, okay? And the values, the mission, the things that the staff are doing. If you're doing any of these CSR points that Gabby made, this will be the time. And obviously creating a channel for people to also share their CVs so that you begin to build this database pool of candidates. I think Gabby makes a very valid point in saying that your staff are ambassadors, and we know on this continent, in our own respective organization, our staff talk. They do talk, regardless of confidentiality clauses. They do talk, and if you are not having the safety measures, if you are not practicing, they will talk about it. They will talk about it with their friends, their families. You know, so we have to manage them. We have to make them become ambassadors of selling our employer brand. All right. We want them to say, no, at my workplace, before you even enter, you're washing your hands, they give you sanitizers, they make sure tissue points are there. We want them to be the ambassadors, because when I talk about those left behind, really employees are watching and feeling how they're being treated in times of crisis. You know, and sometimes somebody may be going for a job and say, oh, this company is, and they may say, oh, well, my friend told me this company did this. And so we have to really manage the brand, and that really sits with the HR. And coming up with a strategy to manage that, and then, of course, getting the buy-in and support from the marketing and then the top leadership. This is now more than ever, managing the brand, employer brand is really key. Use the things you have that are positive as part of marketing your brand. You know, you need to look at bringing in the value proposition that you're offering, your benefits. There may be something that you offer or you do that others don't do. These are all part of your brand that you should be putting out there to make it attractive, to attract good talent. You know, and our interviews is not enough. We have to kind of come out of this cool, you know, because it's very competitive out there, and we're saying that we want to attract good talent and we want to also retain. So the employer branding is not just the attraction, it's also to retain. So we have to also share and work on using the brand within to make our employees, our existing employees, also buy into the brand, and of course the commitment to stay, to retain them. So this is where it's working. I think this is a very key area where we all need to really look at it amid COVID-19 in terms of how we use it as a way to attract and retain talent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I recall one of the webinars we had, a few weeks ago. We discussed a letter that was issued by an institution to staff.
Yes.
Now, if I see that letter, I'm not going to join that organization.
No, and it was circulating around social media.
Today, I would have a backup plan to leave them in 6 months, because maybe I might need money today. And what does that do? You know, for your hiring budget, what does that do for your image as an employer? It's terrible. So we need to really look at employer branding very carefully during this period. If you don't have an employer value proposition, please, at this time, make sure that you sit down and prepare one and use it to guide your recruitment and obviously other talent management activities for staff in-house. Yes, there was also another point on the employer branding I wanted to raise. And also, yes, those who do have an employer value proposition, I think this time is really the utmost test of the viability or the truth of that EVP.
Yeah, value proposition.
We
Yeah,
put in a whole lot of things, and we don't mean them, or it's probably something that a competitor has or something that someone has. We just pick it, we import it, and we don't use it. This is really going to be a test of your EVP and your potential candidates your staff are all watching how you're going to imbibe this EVP. All right, okay, so moving on from employer brand, I'm sure if there are other questions, we can address them. Moving on from that, to be able to build a good talent pool, you need to first assess what you have at the moment. What are your sources, your sourcing methods? Are we just placing job adverts anywhere? What are the returns on those job boards that we're using? So most of the most obvious ones would be job boards. There's several job boards that we have here. We have in Ghana. You also have the Googles and LinkedIn's and the large ones which then post your jobs to other platforms. Have we checked the quality of candidates and the responses we're getting from these job boards? This is a time to do that. There are a lot of employers, a lot of companies who engage recruitment agencies now, like ourselves, right? Now, how well are your recruitment agencies doing? How are you engaging with them? Are we holding them accountable? Are we seeing them as partners to your recruitment efforts, or even larger, your talent management efforts? Because we have sometimes we have a job and then we give it to 5, 6 agencies, they all scramble for CVs and then they just send it through to us. Okay. Are we checking which agency is bringing you the best candidates? The frequency of, or the frequency and how well they're bringing these candidates, how well they're meeting the KPIs. Have we set KPIs for our recruitment partners? Because recruitment agencies are a very critical part of our talent acquisition efforts. So it's imperative, even now more than ever, that we assess them against these factors that I've mentioned: accountability. We hold them accountable. Are their methods aligned with our talent strategy? Anita mentioned in-house career pages. We need to review that as well. What kind of message are we putting out there on our career page? There are a lot of career pages that are inactive. Sometimes when you put up a job, or when you apply to a posted job, you may not get any response. And so your career page really isn't very effective. So what are we doing there? So we need to review those as well. These areas that I've mentioned, obviously, and a lot more, I will deal with them in the next slide, are very good sources for us to build a good talent pool, to start getting CVs coming in. There are places where at any point in time they have about 5 CVs, for each job. That's not going to get you anywhere. You need as much as you can. You need a wider reach. You need to expand your network so that you can reach those whom you're targeting. Okay, you're not targeting every Tom, Dick, and Harry. So it's important that we widen the scope and also source with intention. There are also certain jobs that are not, you don't need to place them on every job board. They're very specialist roles. So we need to look at those sources and review them against the kind of skills we require in-house. Further to that, I'm sure that every now and then we come across very good candidates who are working either with competition or comparator companies who have skills that we need in-house and who aren't particularly looking for jobs. Fortunately or unfortunately, this time there may be some changes in the situation of what we call passive candidates. So they weren't looking for jobs maybe 2 months earlier. Now, depending on how their employers have also responded to COVID, they may be somewhat back on the market, this is a time to engage them. This is a time to reach out to them, have chats with them, you know, build a connection. And as and when you require them to be on board, at that point, you have broken the ice, you've been able to get through to them with your employer value proposition, you've been able to get through to them with whatever offer you have, so that at the time that is needed, you can seamlessly and quickly bring them on board. Now, there's also a very crucial pool that we need to look at. The staff, our staff, the internal talent pool. So you would find that one, through the evolution of some of the jobs, there would be a wealth of skills with some of our staff, which we probably hadn't had the need to tap into. We haven't assessed, because sometimes we don't do, you know, usual assessments, and so there's skills inherent in our companies that we don't even know about. So our staff are a very good source of a talent, or a very good pool for us to start looking at. So if there are new jobs that have been created from our response to COVID, or from, you know, the change in the way of work, we need to identify them clearly. Yes, we do have our performance management systems. Depending on how well or how objective they are, they may either give a true picture, or they may give, you know, a different picture altogether. And so those are good. It's a good place to start from, but they may not necessarily assess new skills or objectively assess existing skills. So talent assessments are key here. There are several talent assessments, and I know OML runs, you know, a myriad of assessments to address every level. So from you know, officer level, executive level, leadership roles, there are several assessments that are tailored to each of these category of workers. Anita, do you want to chip in on the assessments? Because I know that this is an area that...
Yeah, I mean, I believe assessments is important here. Of course, we're talking amid COVID-19, and we know that employers are working lean, so perhaps maybe the investment that they may make in the standard test that you were just mentioning that we do may not be something that they're prioritizing now. So that means that as practitioners, you've got to get creative in terms of how you make sure you assess your pool. What we're saying is that, yes, we know we have appraisals, and usually we use these subjective ways where our managers will nominate and so on. What we're saying is that because we're in a position where we really need to have a good, strong team to survive during and post, we've got to do a little bit more than our usual way. So you may have to now look at work sampling tests. This is where you create specific assessments per the job category or the function within your organization as another factor to assess, to make sure that the people that you are selecting are having the competencies, are having the skills, are having the knowledge, and where they don't, that's where the gap is. You now have to have a strategy on how you're going to develop those talents, because them not having it doesn't necessarily mean you will not put them in the pool. It just now means that we have to have a strategy to develop that talent. You know, general good practice usually means that we should already be mapping and having what core skills, what levels of experience and so on we already have in our organization under our L&D. But if we've not been doing that, then this is a good time to begin that exercise to try to understand what do we have. So that really requires now going to review your CVs, or redoing a whole new capture and just asking employees to just maybe refill in skills and experience, qualifications, etc. forms for you to actually now curate to see what you have. And then based on that, you begin your strategy on developing assessments to what we call skills inventories or skills assessments to really find out what you have. All right, you may not necessarily start off doing this across the whole organization. You may just decide to focus on the core business areas of the business and then cascade down afterwards. Because at the moment, our strategies have to be very tight. We are not able to do everything. We have to focus very much on continuity and survival. So you may focus on those areas as to what do you know, because it's important. Do we have the skills and competencies to survive through this, which we are now being told 12 to 18 months we may be in this, and then post this situation, do we have, and if we don't, what are we doing about it during? You can't actually wait to do something about it at the end. You really can't, because your business is still moving. It's not stopping. So these are some of the things for me on the assessment. It should be looked at, and if you think yes, actually, you know what, we can assign a budget to look at more standard tests, because your leadership is very important right now. Good managers and good leaders. So if you knew you had a problem with your talent in relation to your managers or your leadership in terms of their style of management is costing you talent leaving, or it's not that effective, this will be the time to say, like, we're trying to streamline, we're trying to strengthen ourselves, and this may be a good time to assess, to really identify their gaps as well, in order to ensure you have a good strategy to help them develop their leadership skills and competencies and abilities. So assessments are very key. I mean, we do a lot of assessments, and we do a lot of the standard well-known ones, as well as support to build sample tests. So if you are interested, fine. If not, I think it's something now we are understanding that. For me, I like to empower the HR to also look at what it can do in addition to what it can buy in. So this would be a good start to try and at least start a work sample test.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Anita. Yeah. All right. So, I mean, what does all this mean for us? Moving on from all the areas that you've explored, what are the practical things that we can do to build a talent pool? So first of all, just did a little summary here. So first of all, we talked about building a strong employer brand. We talked about building a strong employer brand. So our COVID response, let's make sure we are doing something, even if it's very little, nothing is too small. I mean, let's do something in that area, identify areas that haven't been addressed yet, so which we have the skills in as an organization and respond to that. And let's make sure that we're engaging our target audience via social media. We're publicizing this. We're working together with marketing to help us to project the efforts that we're doing in this area. Let's engage and communicate with our prospective candidates. If you look at, we've talked about social media, however, how we even engage on social media is important. You don't want to go on advertising. If you are a paint manufacturer, you're not just going there saying, come and buy my paint. You want to talk about how green your paint is, in quotes. You want to talk about how sustainable your paint is. Engage people on articles, on features, on things that matter. This has been a very effective way of targeting people or attracting people who actually care about some of these values. So let's try and engage our prospective candidates during this time. Let's use fair practices when we are making reductions in our headcounts vis-a-vis redundancies and even our layoffs, our temporary layoffs at this time. Engage laid off staff and the staff left behind. There are different levels of engagement for these staff. You may have laid your staff off temporarily. How are you engaging them during this period? Communication, again, is key. a call here and there to them to see if, to give some kind of support if they require something that you can do. I know that during layoffs, there are some people who have laid off staff without pay. There are others who are given some form of support, so maybe some, how do I call it? Just a small sustenance amount for them to keep. So it keeps them loyal. It keeps them thinking about you. And you are also minimizing the risk of losing some high performers who unfortunately had been laid off during that period. Again, how do we engage the staff who've been left behind? Do they understand why their colleagues had left or their colleagues had been laid off? Are they living in fear that they will be laid off next or they're going to be made redundant? We need to engage them. We need to communicate our strategies, and like Anita said, our business continuity efforts as well to them, so we ensure that they are retained. And obviously, so we ensure that they are retained. And then implement our COVID preventative measures. So are we being safe at the workplace? I think we've talked at length about this. Now let's review existing sourcing methods. Evaluate your recruitment partners. We've mentioned this. We've talked about this at length. Evaluate your job boards and other sourcing methods. Use online sourcing. This is probably the most effective way available to us, even pre-COVID, for most jobs, not all, but most. Let's use the online sourcing. That minimizes risk and also increases our reach. So with that, we have our job boards, your LinkedIn, Google, etc. And another one I want to introduce is virtual career fairs. So we're using all these virtual platforms. We have Zoom, we have GoToWebinar, we have so many platforms that we use to engage our staff, to have meetings. At this time, we can organize a virtual career fair. Coupled with your employer value proposition and branding, you can run something like that. That would encourage and attract candidates to you. This would increase the number of CVs that you would have at hand. People would have the opportunity to send through their CVs to you. You are engaging them maybe on an advisory level, giving them, maybe you may not be able to engage them all, but you're giving them advice, and that sort of imprints your company in their minds. So you're always available to them. Do engage passive candidates. We've talked at length about passive candidates, and obviously manage your internal talent pool. So administering our talent assessment, as Anita said, work samples, making sure that you're identifying gaps, skills gaps, and when you do identify them, let's make sure we manage them. So I think we can move on to the next slide now.
I like this idea of the virtual career.
You can also do this, yeah.
Yeah, we're about to do one on a virtual career fair on opportunities in the HR field for OML Africa.
Right.
So that should be interesting. I think is a way forward. The virtual career fairs it's really worth having a look at. There's lots of opportunity and benefits from acquiring and engaging talent online. Okay.
No, it's good. It's fantastic. Otherwise, we won't have, our face-to-face assessment centers, and at this time, we won't be able to do that. All right, moving on to selection process. How viable are selection processes? I mean, I think the most commonplace ones have been face-to-face interviews. Some people would do, an odd telephone interview here and there, but primarily what I've come across are face-to-face interviews. Face-to-face interviews are almost extinct now. Okay, almost. In this time, we can't expose ourselves that much and expose the candidates. We have to be safe. So we need to review the measures that the current processes we have. If face-to-face interviews are your only selection processes, clearly it won't be safe to implement. You need to look at the other ones that you have as well. Are you holding assessment centers? Are you running psychometric tests? What methods or how are you administering them? Are you doing them online, or do they have to come to your premises to take them? So all these things need to be considered. More so, you also need to consider the new skill requirements. As we keep saying, the jobs will evolve. Not all of them, but some jobs will evolve. And there will be a need to, for new skills that we don't currently have, at the workplace. A few years ago, there was nothing like social media influencer. We didn't know anything about it. This is a full-time job now. So there are new jobs being created out of changes, and COVID is one big change to us. So what skills do you think would be required during this period? But the one that comes to me immediately is being IT savvy. Sometimes we put it on our CV, so I'm good with Office Suite. I can do this and that and emails and all that. But during this period, it has become apparent that most employees are not, they're struggling so much with technology. And so these are things that you want to look out for and ensure that your selection processes are enabling you to assess these skills adequately. Okay? And in considering all these, whatever changes that you make should not compromise your compliance to maybe your recruitment policies or laws, and it should not compromise the effectiveness of the selection process that you have in place. So before I move on to the types, what we can do, Anita, is there anything that you want to mention, let's talk about on this?
No, just that if you're still doing the face-to-face, just be conscious of the social distancing. That's
Absolutely.
really.
Absolutely, yeah. All right. So selection processes. What do we do now? Immediately, I think online for most jobs, and this may not be applicable to all jobs. So I want to let's talk about the ones that we can do: back office staff, clerical roles, IT, jobs that can be run, that can do online, have access to online facilities. So we can do tech-enabled assessments, online psychometric assessments, personality testing, and profiling. All these can be administered online without you coming into contact with the individual. It also helps to further screen your CVs. Now, sometimes what I do, I will do assessments before we even proceed to any kind of interaction, because you want to understand at the first level how the individual matches the job that you're looking for. So you also don't waste time. And in this particular case, you're also not putting yourself and the candidate at risk. Do telephone screening, very important. The very basic things that one can ascertain from a telephone screening. So by all means, let's do that. If we've stopped doing them, let's introduce them. Video interviewing. This has become commonplace now. So there are two parts of it. Now you have your pre-recorded video interviews, which are somewhat similar to your assessments. This would be a pre-recorded video of the employer administering about 3 or 4 questions. The employee receives them, they click on them, and then they answer it, and the answers are recorded and sent back to you. It's a very good way of doing pre-screening as well, and you have the opportunity to see the candidate, to see the mannerisms and how they respond to certain questions. And then we have the live interview, which would be your Skype, Zoom, and all the other platforms. So that requires the employer having a live interview with the candidate, just as we're doing now on the webinar. So it's live, right? Now, if you want to, or obviously you will be involving the hiring manager or the person for whom, or for whose department you're hiring for. They are not particularly HR people. Maybe we do have the benefits and the experience in running large-scale interviews. Now we're also throwing in having interviews on video, which presents, another challenge. So it's important that we train our hiring managers on using video interviews and also establish clearly what you're expecting. The challenge here with video interviews is if your expectations are all over the place, if you're not clear, you will miss a lot of indicators that would have ordinarily come through at the face-to-face. So it's important that you establish your expectations clearly. There are a lot of tips that you can share with OML to share with participants of this video, but video interviewing is a must in these times. In doing all this, the aim is to reduce the volumes of face-to-face interviews, okay? Because we do appreciate that we cannot do face-to-face interviews altogether for some roles. There's some that can be done online. Now, I don't think that a lot of employers are comfortable hiring somebody whom they haven't met yet face-to-face. So if we go through all these processes, at the end of the day, we have about 2 or 3 candidates to meet. So then it becomes easier to implement the COVID preventative measures. So you can have one big boardroom, or at least a long table that would ensure you're keeping a 6 feet distance from the candidate. You'll be able to administer masks, for instance, because there's going to be a lot of talking. You'll be able to give them, the sanitary things, the hand washing materials, sanitizers, and all that. So it's easier to implement those when your volumes have reduced. And prior to them coming over, it's important that you engage them and inform them of the safety measures. So when they come over, they're also aware. It reduces maybe the liability on you as well, and candidates come into the interview also well protected. Yeah, so I think these are some things that we can do to ensure that we have a good selection process in the midst of it. I think we can move on to the next slide. Anita, any points here?
No, it's fine. Absolutely. I think you've touched on all of it.
Good stuff. So, if you're recruiting, as we mentioned earlier, if you're currently recruiting, there are things that you need to think about as well. And I want to bring your attention to some of the things that we've mentioned earlier. So the skills, have you considered the skills that are required for today's way of work? Have you considered the contract type? Are you just issuing the old contracts that you had already? Have you considered how such, pandemics or such, cases affect or expose the business? And how are you running onboarding of new staff? So onboarding also has changed immensely. There are some companies who are choosing to do a full virtual onboarding. Let's explore some of the ways that we can do that effectively, because at the stage of onboarding, I know there's the element of face-to-face, and safety again becomes a concern. Anissa, can we move on to the next slide? Okay, so there are different elements within the onboarding process. So you have referencing and pre-employment checks. At this time, pre-employment medicals can become a bit of a challenge because the hospitals are, everyone's staying clear of the hospitals. That's not to say if you have an actual concern, you shouldn't go to the hospital, but it's best to stay away. So you wouldn't want to also put your employees in that situation. Moreover, medical checks are not particularly essential at this moment when all efforts are being channeled to managing COVID at this point. So it's important for you as an employer to prioritize some of the checks that you do for, at the pre-employment stage. If these are not particularly vital, you can delay them or defer them if possible to a later date. But it's important that we inform the candidate of the implication. If we're deferring your medicals, we're letting you understand that it's not that we're not going to do medicals or we're not going to do a reference check on you. We will run it at such and such time as and when things ease up, but the offer we give you is conditional. Wherefore, if anything unsatisfactory, for instance, for referencing comes up, you would have the right to terminate the employment appropriately or accordingly. So in line with the contractual notice. So it's important that we prioritize the checks that are required. Culture. Culture is a very important aspect that we try to relay during the recruitment process and even more so during the onboarding. It's one of the questions that employees ask, what is the culture of the organization? And when they ask those questions, they want to understand things like how decisions are made. Is it a very formal environment? What is your policy on flexi working? Things like that. So you want to bring this through virtually as much as possible. So if your new staff is offsite, try and make sure that you hold some kind of an online social meet and greet with other staff, maybe other staff within their department. Into the interactions would help the employee to get a feel of the organization, even the tone of the tone of the organization in terms of language, in terms of its approach, whether it's more formal, it helps for the new staff to get some insights into the culture of the organization. It also helps to assign a buddy, because if they're offsite for, let's say, the first month of their employment, it's good to assign a buddy who would be helping them to immerse into the organizational culture. And also the element of storytelling. It's important. Every organization has a story to tell. And so it's important that we bring this through. I know doing it virtually, can be a challenge, but it's important that you bring this through during, even from initial contact all the way through to onboarding, during the onboarding. Now, virtual orientation. So we are trying to do all the things that we do when the employee starts on their first day online. So one, we usually have a presentation where we talk about the company, where we talk about the department, some policies, issue them hard copies of things to write out. All of these can be put together as a soft copy and shared with the employee. So it's important that HR works closely with IT to ensure that we're preparing these packs and they're in line with our IT policies. We're not exposing the company in any way as well. But these can be prepared online and shared with the candidates. And IT can also assist us to prepare a virtual tour of the company. So this could be a tape of or a 360 degree tour of the company as well. And all of these things are when the candidate is off-site, at least for the first few months of their employment. Cybersecurity becomes an area that we need to consider greatly, because you are issuing this employee probably your laptop or access into your portal, internal portal. So it's important that you engage your IT department to ensure safe access to the company's portals and information. If you don't have one, if you don't have an IT department, I will still recommend that you engage a consultant or someone with the requisite knowledge to help you to do this safely, because there is quite a high risk there. I don't know, Nita, do you want to shed light on cybersecurity? Because this is an area that, in the spirit of everything online, we get carried away.
Yeah, we're actually going to do a session on cybersecurity, looking at not just the remote working, but other things that we need to think about around the whole cybersecurity, from policy down to systems. So those experts will shed more light on the things that the HR and employer needs to be thinking about now, and then of course moving into the future. But that has become a bit of a case because of the sudden move for some companies into remote working and giving access to their servers and so on. Yeah. So if you know that this is an area that you want a bit more insights on, then I guess you should attend the cybersecurity one. And what's good is that the experts talking on that actually are dealing with managing systems on the continent. So they are going to tap into some of the challenges in relation to security for us, because of course we are digitizing, but we do have some challenges and then ways in which you can get around it. And then we look at the aspect of policy as well.
Okay.
So good. To be continued.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And then if you are doing an on-site onboarding, please, we can't overemphasize this enough. Make sure you're practicing safety measures in line with COVID. One of the effective ways you could do that is probably minimize the number of people who would come in for an orientation. So maybe you can have 2 or 3 sessions in the day or over a period. So you don't have maybe 10 people in, for onboarding at the same time. That's if you have a very large organization or a very large site, and you can manage that, fair enough. But look at the size of your company, your capacity, your infrastructure, and make a decision on this. But it will be useful to have very small groups to do the onboarding for, and try and provide as much information as you can to the candidates prior to the orientation date. So you don't need to go through all those processes and prolong the time of contact.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's about it for talent acquisition. I know I talked a lot about recruitment agencies. I talked a lot about employer brand propositioning, videos, and virtual onboarding support. These are areas that we can help you to achieve. So, for instance, when it comes to the pre-recorded video interviewing, we hold stock of some pre-recorded video hours. If you want to dip your toes into that form of interviewing, you do not need to purchase a whole pack or go. Yeah, you can just take piecemeals from us and just to test how well you do with it, and also use it as a training ground for your hiring managers as well. So these are the areas that we can support you. So I'm gonna hand over to Anita, who will take us through the talent management bit.
Okay, so I'm just going to run through, just as Gabby did, some of the actions around, because we've kind of generated conversation around, and then we'll take some questions just before we close. We may just go over just a little bit, but I think it's important, so you forgive us. Okay, so now for me, I'm coming from the perspective of managing the talent, looking at some key areas. So when it comes to redundancies and layoffs, it's important to handle these areas well. I think we mentioned that earlier on. So layoff of top talent, if you can use laying off rather than redundancy, which is more of a termination and a bit final, unless you're going to rehire them again, in as far as possible, you may want to consider using layoff to manage your top talent rather than making them redundant. And then also you may want to consider other alternatives like part-time work, short-term workings, piece by piece, job sharing careers, etc. I mean, we covered this in terms of the legal side in some of our earlier webinars, but you may want to consider alternatives. It doesn't necessarily all have to be either a layoff or redundancy if you can help it. I mean, it all depends, I know, on your bottom line. One of the things that I've been saying just from what I'm experiencing with my clients is that the business continuity plan has to have a mix of strategies, a mix of methods. In as far as possible, I know for some of my clients, we're using sometimes nearly all, or sometimes maybe just 3 or 4. It does depend, but you really do need to look at it closely, and you're using a mix because you're trying to stretch it out to take you as far as it can, in hope that by the time you come into the end of it, we are kind of coming out of this. So that's just a point of reference. So these are some of the things you need to consider around, redundancies and layoffs. And then also the selection criteria is very important. It should be fair and objective in as far as possible. Yesterday in the redundancy layoff webinar, we're talking about the legal side of some of these issues. So for example, if someone feels the process hasn't been unfair, they can raise a complaint around the whole procedure, in which case, if you went to the NLC, they're going to look at whether you followed the fair process. So the process is very key, all right? And you should be able to explain to somebody who asks you, why did you select me and not, John or David? So that's very important. So for that reason, I just kind of want to just expand on that a little bit, just to give you a clarity on what we're saying in terms of this. So you want to start with your core roles that you need to survive COVID-19. That's the priority right now. What is our critical staff to survive? And then we're also thinking, as we begin to come out, who would they be? And those are the ones we're saying we should manage, either through layoffs, with allowances, and just finding ways to manage them so we don't lose them and all that. Now we have to go recruit them in, all right? So you have to start with your core roles. Then you need to use an objective selective criteria that you can defend if it becomes necessary, all right? So I've made the point about that. And do not use, in as far as possible, subjective selection criteria or perceived judgment-based or random acts. By this I mean, this employee, a few months ago, she shared lots of chocolates to everyone. Everyone was really happy, so we should keep them. I mean, random acts, things that are not consistent. That employee has just done it once or even twice, and we're using that as a basis to judge that they are a good performer and all of those things. No, these are all subjective measures. You need to consider objective measures or judgments that will not, if someone questions, you can actually justify, all right? And then you need to use rating or weight, all right, to score and use them to make your selection. Now, whilst it's expected that a lot of the time we are using experience, qualifications, for roles, all right, now will always be a primary criteria in selection. There are other things that you can consider when we talk about objective selection. So things like work performance, as evidence from the appraisals. Earlier on, I mentioned to you that you want to look at a minimum period over 3 years, 5 years. Of course, the HR and the managers, you can set that period. Attendance records, disciplinary or warnings on file, length of surveys, then of course, you're looking at the core and essential nature of that position to the company. So here we're saying when you're selecting people for layoffs, redundancies, etc., you should use some form of structured selective criteria. So this is how what I'm saying could look like, okay? So we've decided that the reason being in that with the objective selection criteria is that I can defend that, you can defend that, and actually an employee cannot challenge it because, for example, can you, if you're supposed to be in finance and the requirement is that you have a first degree, you are a member of the relevant professional body, CMC, ACCI, CMA, whatever, and that's a criteria that we are using to select. Is either you've got the degree or you don't. Is either you're a member of the CMA or you don't. How are you, if you are, it's going to be evident. If you're not, it's going to be evident. How are you going to challenge me on that? It's either you have it or not. If we talk about the number of direct work experience, it's the same thing. When we check your CV and check your work history, we are able to validate your work experience. It's either you have 5 years, 10 years, 2 years or not. If we talk about length of service, we know what time you started working for the company. It's either you've been here with us for 2 years, 1 year or not. These are factual information that I can defend with documentation and proof. When we use subjective, okay, well, the manager thinks that we should keep this person in his team because he works well. On what basis are we, how can we justify? Maybe Tom also works well. Are you with me? But when we begin to compare them using objective criteria, we'll be able to determine whether actually David works well or David is the person in that place we should select based on the information we hold. Because it's not just also about skills and competence and that, it's also about character. You want people who are going to go above and beyond for you right now in this scenario, who are even going to understand certain things, like maybe you're not able to pay them even all the hours they work. You want people who have some behavioral competencies that you know are really needed, like commitment to attending, to working, to even if they're working from home. So these factors are also important in your selection insofar as their experience, their performance is also factors, okay? So when we're talking about objective selection criteria, this is what we mean. You may, a number of disciplinaries, either you have disciplinary on record or you don't, okay? And we're looking at that as a form of measuring the character and so on of people. The core essential nature of the role, we know the roles that are critical, that are core to the business. If they are not working, the business cannot function. So how core is that particular role to? Remember that when you're selecting people for layoffs or redundancies, you may be doing in a department, so you may not necessarily be sending all of them home. You're going to have to select within the people in that department, and this is what we're talking about. All right, where you just know there's just 2 people and they have to go, you may not necessarily feel you need to, although I advise you, you should have grounds for decision. People always want to know why, okay? But when you're making selections, this is it. For me, I feel whether it's 2, whether it's 1, have some kind of selection criteria so you can explain to the person how you came to your decision. If we talk about appraisal, so this is where we're talking about appraisal outcome, okay? And hopefully you have an element of objectivity and some subjective elements in your appraisal system, and you are looking at how this person has consistently performed over a period of time, okay? So that you are picking consistent performers, people who you know are able to consistently deliver, not random, or this year they scored 4, that last year they scored 2, no those, that's not consistent performance, okay? So these are some of the things. Once you've decided on your selection criteria, you have to assign ratings, okay? So here you see the logic of mine. I'm giving 10 for each time the person meets the actual criteria, 7 if they somewhat meet, and then 5 if they don't meet, okay? So if you go by that, you realize that under qualification relevant for the role, Mary scored 10 because she has all the right qualifications directly required for the role, whilst David had indirect qualifications for the role, so he scored 7, and John had no direct or indirect qualifications, so he scored 5. So what I'm saying is the criteria have to be further broken down when you have actually selected them. If we take, for example, the number of years of direct work experience, okay, you may want to break it down into those under 5 years, you score 5. Those 5 to 10 years, you score 7. Anyone above 10 years, you score 10. So I'm saying you have to have value. You're going to assign values towards these selection criteria, which then gives you the scoring. That will help you determine the final totals of who you should be selecting, okay? If we take attendance, lateness, okay? You may decide to look at the number of lateness per a specific period of time, all right? Is it in the last 1 year, in the last 2 years, and use that to determine. So if the person has under 5, maybe you score, so the lower the lateness, the higher the score. So if they've got 5, you score them 10. If they've got 5 to 10, you score them a 7. If you've got more than 10, you score them the lowest mark, which would be 5, okay? So because obviously we're not going to score you high for being late. Sick leave, attendance record, how reliable are they in attending work? So the person with a clean record obviously is going to score 10. The person who has the lowest, you're going to give them the lowest score, i.e. they have a lot of absences in their record. Number of disciplinary, maybe someone, those under 5 will get the top mark of 10. Those between 5 and 10, 7, and those above will get the, that kind of thing. So you will have to rate each of the criteria and use that to do the scoring, as my example I've just shown you here. And then you realize you now total up, and in this total up, it indicates clearly that Mary, out of these 3, should be the one we pick, because maybe now we can't actually have 2 people, we only need 1 person. And this exercise has helped me to find the 1 person who meets this criteria. And a lot of the time, this assessment should lead you to the right people. If your performance appraisals and all of these things we're talking about, you've actually been accurately recording those data, all right? So if I have to choose between Mary, David, and John, I will have to choose Mary. I know that if Mary should not be available and there's an issue, I know I can rely upon David. John, there's not a lot between David and John, so we may have to decide what's important to us. We may use something like the core essential nature of the position, of which David scores the highest, all right? So this makes me, when John comes and says, why didn't you select, why wasn't I selected? We all work in this department. Why is it Mary has been selected? I can't give Mary's score to John, but I can clearly show him, these were the criteria, this is how you scored, and this is why you were not selected, all right? So I just spent a bit of time on that, because that is really important, especially if you should have any challenges after COVID-19 and someone maybe bringing issues against you. Okay. So then let's run through remote work. We've already touched on that. Here we're saying that you need to identify the roles that you can work from home. I think Gabby has listed them. You need to think about the infrastructure that you need to put in place, the laptops, access to internet, etc. You need to have a working from home policy that allows some flexibility in terms of working hours, maybe allowing employees to be able to choose the times that they're working and so on, especially those with kids and so on. And actually, in a lot of the information we'll be curating around remote working, we find that they are saying that those who have a bit of input in the working hours, actually they get a better productivity from them, meaning that if I'm insisting you start at 8, when actually if you start at 10, if you work 10 till later, it was better for me, we should allow some flexibility there. But that will be for your decision, but we think that's really important in this working from home scenario. Effective monitoring system that is not overbearing, all right? We need to strike a balance as to if they were in a workplace, the level of monitoring we do should kind of be considered along with the working from home. So to ensure that works well, you need to set clear tasks, set clear KPIs, and use trackers, whether it's work trackers or you're using technology. For example, for us, we are using Zoho Connect, which is really good for tracking. I mean, it tells us things like when a task was set, how long before the task is dealt with, how long it takes for the task to be completed. It gives us so many insights. So you may want to use a technology platform to make life easier in tracking. But if you're not able to, then you need to use maybe your own internally created trackers, all right? Set deadlines. You really have to set deadlines for people working from home, all right? And the setting of clear tasks means you've got to take away into consideration the quantity of work you are assigning. So if the person is doing sales from home, you've given them units, a phone, they're supposed to be calling people, you need to set targets for how many calls are they supposed to make in a day, you know, and then where are they reporting? Are they reporting it in an Excel tracker, or are they going to use HubSpot to record it? That's a sales system, you know? So this is some of the things. Implement core hours and flexi time. It's important. I know some of our clients, we've got core hours. So between 8 and 2 is core hours. After that, you can do flexi time. So look at that. What does that work? If you're not having technology to do flexi time, you can always create the flexi time sheets and time sheets or the money or the logins in Excel. All right. I think I have one there. If anyone's interested, if you just message me, I can share it with you. You just have to adjust, edit it to suit yourself. But it's really good to have tracking the flexi time, because you don't want a scenario where you're not able to keep count. Then technology. So performance and productivity is very important. So we're saying, for me, I feel technology makes life easier. I'm very much into technology because it just makes things go faster. But some of you, I know, it's about investment. So you've got to see what you can access, all right, from your organization to make it easier in terms of monitoring performance and productivity. Attendance apps. We at OML, we're using apps because obviously some of you may have clock in, clock out, but they may not be able to be on your phones and things. If you have if you can be done on your phones, you don't have problem. But where it's one of those systems where it is not automated on apps or even on your phone, then you need to look at, in the interim of COVID-19, how would you be able to track attendance for those who are home, etc. And apps are good. There's one called Field Sense, that's one that we use. You can also use Google Locations. There's lots out there. You just need to do some research and find one that temporarily you think will work for your organization. Then the first, they're talking about bringing, that's Google and Apple, some form of contact tracing API for us to use. Apparently it's meant to be next week. We'll see how that works. And this may be good for where you're having people, you know, who are home being self-isolated, who are supposed to be working from home because they've been self-isolated, and making sure they're not roaming around. This may be good for us. And if they have to go out, at least keeping track of where they are, so that if anything, we can trace people. Shift system, you want to move online using technology. There are lots of online shift systems that you can use. Makes it so much easier to monitor and make changes and see patterns and shifts. Like I know some of my clients, we're running lots of different, we're running 3 shifts, 4 shifts. The whole idea is to say that if a shift group gets contaminated, we have 3 more to rely on or 2 more rely on, depending whether we're doing 3 or 4 and so on. So that becomes a bit confusing trying to manage it in Excel. So we use shift system software online in the cloud, something to look at. And then of course, as I said, there are flexi time technology. So these are the points we're saying, actions that you can take around the working time. And then employee engagement and wellness is very important here as well. Here we're talking about employee social engagement. You know, maybe you have WhatsApp groups. We think that's a very good idea. There's this app called House Party app, and is one that is really good for trying to bring the social side. So if you're in an organization where maybe every Friday you do kinky afternoon, or you go out with some of the staff to have kebabs, or you have some kind of social something happening, this House Party app is a really good one to investigate, where when you can create group conversations or add teams, and when they are home, you can find that someone could be, you know, drinking a beer or eating a lot, and you can be talking. It's like a really social, it's just meant to be taking the stress out. It's more like a fun interaction. So if in your culture, you know that, oh, we do a lot of social stuff as an organization, and now with COVID-19 and the lockdown, not lockdown, and all these things happening, we're not really able to socialize because of social distancing. Then we're gonna socialize using technology. So check out the House Party. I think there are other ones, but this is one I've looked at. I think it's quite cool. So you can check that out. Company social groups. You all have company social groups. I do think they're very important right now, where HR should be, you know, keeping the positive vibe going with positive inspirational quotes, or checking on people, or getting people to share how they, what's happening for those maybe who are in self-quarantine or who are at home because you're managing social distancing. You know, in one of the ways that is being done is sometimes some people work 2 weeks and some people go off for 2 weeks. So we think that these social platforms and company updates kind of keeps everybody going, but keep it interesting. Let's bring some fun and a bit of human element into it, because it's really stressful, you know, this whole scenario, you know, and some people are just not used to being in their house this number of consistent times. So a lot of the social groups and talking and just kind of lighting it up is really important. So you really need to kind of review your or create your employee engagement strategy for this period of the COVID-19. So it may mean you have to vary what you're already doing to specifically look at how is being impacted in the COVID-19. And these are some of the suggestions we're making. Self-isolated employees, you know, so have a check-in, well-being, like checking on their well-being and their mental state. You know, this can be done through the social, a phone call. I think people talking to people helps. So HR could be checking, or like Gabby mentioned, budding on the onboarding. You could assign other employees, colleagues of theirs, who you say, right, can you make sure you're checking on them? So that they don't, you know, they don't feel the pressure, and they know that actually people are thinking of them and so on. And this idea of people being stigmatized doesn't start forming in their heads, because psychology is playing a key role here. Mental health is a big issue here right now. So I think that's really important, that you need to think about how you're checking in for such employees on isolation. And even if we should go back on lockdown, how we're going to keep it going with the rest of the employees. Provide things for the employees to do to keep busy. All right, and so somebody may be on self-quarantine, but they're not sick. They're just being quarantined because they've been part of the contact tracing. So they can still be working and stuff to keep busy. Messages from other work colleagues, you know, that's where all these social points are, but you may make it a bit more specific because you want to make sure it's done. So you may assign that to people. I think video journals for those in isolation is a good one. It's far better than maybe sometimes writing. They can do video journals, and share them maybe once a week or every few days on how they're doing, what new skills or something. Just trying to keep it light. You know, we have to look at that side, because we just can't be so serious and just looking at the negative all of the time. We have to find a way to stay positive, and that's another way. Provide guidelines for self-isolation using you know, WHO and the approved sources to kind of come up with guidelines for the self-isolation. We're trying to curate what the CDC, the WHO, and others are saying to see if we can share that, because so much information is out there. I tend to do curation, just pick all the key things and just leave all the other stuff, because it's just too much of information overload. And then I try to share them with those, you know, in my networks and stuff. So that it makes things easier. But you do need some kind of guidelines so that they are aware of the fact that they're in isolation. That means that even if they are in their house with their families, they have to isolate themselves. They have to have a system, because you don't want to contaminate your family. Because some people have had the disease, but their family members have not, even though they're in their house, because it's been caught early. So the minute it's detected, you want to have guidelines as to how they do it. So you realize someone may be in a room in the house, but people bring through, they keep the distancing and so on. People need to understand, because we want to protect the community as well. And then wellness counselors, a lot of issues. You know, if you don't already have an employee assistance program, you may want to consider maybe just temporarily sourcing in counselors. We have a webinar coming up on wellness with some of the people who are doing really well. Actually, they're doing a lot of this online, a lot of this counseling, calling employees, where a lot of the companies in Ghana and other places are using them. So we're going to do something for them to give us, from the workplace perspective, what are some of the challenges, what can be done. And I guess maybe because they're experts, if you feel you want to tap into their services, you can. But mental health is a big issue right now. So we need a plan to kind of make sure that we're checking on the wellness of our employees. All right. Then lastly, we're talking about those left behind. We have to remember those left behind, okay? They are watching, you know, if they feel that their colleagues, their friends who are working with them, they understand the situation, but they have to leave us. and they don't feel that you've handled it well, they will show you at a time you don't expect it. Okay, so we have to be sensitive to how we implement our plans and actions, particularly when it's leading to things like redundancies and layoff. We do have to be very sensitive to that. And I think if you have a leadership, sometimes our leaderships come from a very, what we call a very high D perspective, just get the work done, just get this done, get this done. But that's where the HR's value comes out, where it's able to manage the stakeholder interest by letting them understand the benefit, like Gabby mentioned about the employer brand, the benefit of doing what we want to do, but in the right way and with some sensitivity. All right, it's not easy for people. And if you don't treat them well, they will feel like, well, I could be treated like this one day, or, so let's be very sensitive about that. Communication is key. Be clear, be open, be honest, be timely, be responsive, and allow for feedback, comments, and suggestions. Don't be afraid for questions. None of us have faced this situation before, so it's normal for people to be anxious. It's normal for people to want to ask questions. It's very important, all right? And also prepare for employee questions and responses. Some people will be very upset. Some people will be very strong. You have to be ready for it. This one we cannot get away from. It is part of it. So being prepared is important. And I think also people who relay information, be very careful who you are allowing to relay, because some people are not very good at relaying information, and they can come out in a way that it makes the situation worse, or even offends or upsets people. So be also, just because someone is very confident in talking doesn't necessarily mean they should be the one to relay difficult information. All right. Inquire about their feelings, their thoughts, show you care. Genuinely, it's very important. Period every week in my team meetings with my team, I'm asking how are we feeling. I get different responses every week. We've been working from home since the 23rd. Everything has turned upside down, but we're coping in it. But I do check, because every week is different how people are feeling, but I feel they appreciate the fact that they get a platform to express how they feel. So this is not difficult. This is something managers can do. Encourage it. Post layoff redundancy work distribution. If you do lay people off and you do make them redundant, you do need to redistribute the work of those you've let go of. So you need to think about how that's going to work and who's going to take it on, and the implications of all of that. Written resources for employees. At the moment, I find myself doing frequently asked questions for employees, frequently asked questions for employers, because of client requests, because we do all these briefings and whatnot. People still just want you, they just want you to read in their own time, or to really understand what the key points being said to them are. So frequently asked questions may be a good way of creating resources for the employees. You may also want to try and maybe do briefings maybe every week or every 3 days or every 2 weeks. It's up to you on how your company works, but it's important. The keeping people up to date is important. It just helps remove a lot of anxieties. Support resources, so is it counselors? You yourself as practitioners need support. Is it webinars? Is it attaching yourself to other colleagues to kind of also bounce off things? Is it attaching to mentors and so on? Find ways to also cope, and also find resources that can help information-wise and so on. And then, of course, business as usual and empathy for this group of people. So after we're giving them resources, we also need to try and get on as normal as possible with empathy, meaning being sensitive to the fact that they may be a bit upset or concerned about their colleagues, but we don't want to go into too long of I don't know if mourning is the right word, just kind of focusing on that side. We need to just get on with business, but empathize that some people may have moments. We just have to be supportive of them. All right. Managing the people left behind is really important. It also, because it has an impact even on their motivation to work, to give you their best. So how you handle their colleagues is key to how well they pick themselves up and carry on for you. All right. Okay. So that brings us to the end of our key points. We hope, the issues on talent management is so many, and we spend ages trying to pick on the key areas we want to share with you. We know that we may have to even look at a second part for post, but at least this is really focusing on what is happening now. So we hope that at least you've gotten some ideas and some key points to consider in your talent management activities. So if we have any questions, we'll take a couple of questions, which if you've got some questions. Okay, so let me just open the questions tab and see what we have around the questions. Okay, so what do we have? Start from the top. I'll do my best. We may not be able to answer all because we know we've gone over time a bit. Okay, so it says, what fair procedure do you advise for a layoff? And also, how do you approach inviting an employee to take an unpaid leave? Okay, right now, the issue is, as I mentioned earlier on in fact, before I answer that question, I need to highlight a point. First of all, employer cannot unilaterally just decide it's going to reduce pay, lay people off, redundant. You cannot do it, regardless of the COVID-19. The law hasn't changed. The law is still the law. What the law is recognizing is that we are in a situation where we've never experienced, and it's brought us chaos, okay, disruption. And now we have to manage it within the law. So what is happening is that you have contracts of employment with your employers or unions, collective agreements. You have to vary the terms. So if you are wanting to make people redundant, you could just follow whatever agreements you have with your collective agreement or in your policy to do the redundancy. You go through the same process. I mean, we've covered this in a bit more extensive, but I'm going to just do my best to summarize. You will go through that. Layoff is not really something in the Ghana labor law you hear a lot, but it's come up a lot because we see, because it's temporary and people don't want to really actually make their people redundant. So laying off people have come in. So we are saying that the fair process and procedure that you would follow in terms of engaging the employee, first of all, you have to put your proposals together. Then you have to engage the employees on what you are proposing and get them to feedback and consent to your proposal before you start applying anything. That is the bottom line. So, but if you are unilaterally doing things, you may get away with it, you may not get away with it. That you will know at the end of COVID if a complaint is brought against you, okay? So the first thing is, I'm a company, I need to lay people off temporarily, or I want to make redundancies. Okay, if you want to make redundancies, you follow what the law says and the practice. Okay, if you know you cannot pay let's say you have a union and you've negotiated that you pay 3 months for every year of service and you know you can't, then you have to negotiate with the union to vary that agreement in the collective agreement for this temporary period, and then the original will resume when normal times occurs. You cannot unilaterally tell the union, yeah, it's 3 months, but we can only pay 1 month, so that's what we do. You can't do, you need to negotiate because the contracts haven't stopped operating. It's just, we have to vary. To vary, we need consent, okay? If you have in your policy, we'll pay 1 month of each year of service, but now it's more 2 weeks. Again, you've got to propose, explain, and get the buy-in, all right? There is no guarantee you're going to get everyone agreeing. That one, I cannot tell you, and I think you know it. And then you have to address that accordingly when that happens. So that is to answer your question. So once you've got the buy-in, and we are saying that if you put the proposal together, you inform the employees, and then you ask them to respond by either expressing their consent or not. Okay, you can make life easier by giving them something to sign and return, saying yes or no, or they write in. You know your organization will work best. We are saying that you should go for documented consent. So later on, someone does not come and say, you just unilaterally decided to do A and B when you know that you informed them and they had said to you it was okay. Okay, so document and trail everything, all right? Once they have agreed, and now you have to, okay, layoff is one of our methods we may use, reducing salary, etc. Then you need to look at how you're going to go about the layoffs. And I think I've explained to you, first of all, it's about how you go about doing your selection. And then once you've done your selection, you now need to engage with those people you're going to lay off and explain and get their feedback, etc. And then you move on to affected. Okay, but you cannot just get up and start laying people off. All right. You're saying the best approach for inviting employees. Now the issue is we were in our discussions under this particular issue. We were saying that really unpaid leave is something that employees were the ones who usually will come and request for, all right? And now the employer is the one instigating it. And we were saying that, well, is it better that you offer it more of a career breaks, unpaid career breaks, or leave of absence or whatnot, which more sits a bit better within the law, you know? But if you need people to take unpaid leave, how long do you want them to take unpaid leave for? It's the same way with layoffs. You know, we're saying 1 month to 3 months is doable. Really beyond that, is it? For someone not to be paid and whatnot. You have to really look at the timelines. How long do you want me to be on unpaid leave for? So is the unpaid leave the model you want to propose, or is career break more what you want to be proposing, that due to financial, you know, we are asking employees to take some career breaks, which means you're still employed, only you're not going to be paid, and we will be, you know, we will revert you once things get better, or, you know, however you want to term it. If you say unpaid leave, how long would that be? All right, for. So terminology you use does make a difference. You know, how long do I need to be on leave for? You know, is it longer than what your current leave period is, or are you expecting it to be longer? What is the timeline? You have to answer that before you have a conversation with them in tapping into it. Okay. I don't know if Gabby, you want to say something on that whilst I try and pin up the other questions.
No, that's fine. I think it's pretty much straightforward. Yeah. That's pretty straightforward. If there are any other questions, we can take those.
Yeah. So there, I have 2 questions. Please share with me tool you mentioned for tracking, and what softwares do you recommend for monitoring work from home, please? You mentioned some. Yeah. So with all these platforms, they have paid and unpaid. Okay. Some of them, the unpaid is by number of employees. So maybe if let's say they may say 15 is, you can have it for free for 15 employees, but you may have 50, in which case you may have to subscribe to the paid version. So that's the first thing. The ones that I mentioned for Zoho Connect is a good one, just because it allows you to create groups, it allows you to create groups for tasks, for groups for conversation. You can even have channels. It kind of really can make you do everything in one platform. But what is really good is the fact that the tasks can move along. So for example, you can have backlog. This is where you issue the task, you can assign it to people, they will move it along, you can see it moving along. When it's completed, you can go and look at the analytics to tell you how long it's taking. So if a task is taking very long, you can see it. If someone hasn't even picked up the task, you can see it, all right? So that's one for if you're trying to be able to monitor productivity and also have everything in one place, because that's the other thing about working from home that is very stressful, trying to track everything happening from different employees, different departments. With Zoho Connect, you can actually create departments and track what they are doing within each department. So check it out. You know, when you finish, for me, I check a lot of platforms. I think, Gabby, remember me telling you about Zoho Connect, and that's the one that I feel it's really one to consider. Very simple platform to use, but very, very effective. Because you have to think about the capacity of our employees and managers using these platforms as well. They may not be very IT or techie savvy, so systems have to be simple as well, in as far as possible. All right, so you can check that one out. I was saying about the house party for the social networking is one, if you want to have a look at that one in the App Store or Apple. I think it's on both Apple and iOS. So if you want to check that out. I'm trying to move up the question. Okay, was that all of it? Okay, let's go up. Okay, I think I answered that one. That was the unpaid leave. Oh, great. I think Okay, this question. In what way, okay, this one says, in what ways do you suggest we include flexi terms that can protect employers in such situations where, while also taking into account the peculiar situation of the talent market in Africa, where there is a strong preference for permanent contracts? Okay, well, the flexible terms is also going to be very much dependent on the role. Okay, I think what we are seeing now is that we are even asking ourselves, some of the roles we have, are they really full-time work? You know, if we're finding that people working from home, we are struggling to get them to do a full 8 hours. That's the first question. You know, that's why I mentioned about the whole part-time and all of those things. That's the one we have to look at. And as for permanent, you're going to have to maybe now consider, do you just make core roles permanent and not non-core roles? All right, do you just make the hard to find talent roles the permanent roles? So now you're actually going to differentiate between what roles are made permanent and what roles are not. These are some of the things you'd have to do the analysis on to decide. So that instead of all roles being permanent, do we now put the value, do we now make the roles that have the highest value or need permanent and then offer other terms for other roles? You know, and that decision may be based on how quickly we can find those other roles. You know, so for example, do we need to make an administrative role permanent? No, we can find lots of administrators. There's so many, you know. But would we need to make somebody working on a rig, you know, a rigger, which is not so easy to find good talent, you know, where they're not expatriates on contracts, where we're using local content? Would we more consider that we should keep those roles as permanent? Just saying, it all would depend on the value of that role, how easily you can replace that role. You get what I mean? These will be the questions you need to ask in order to come to the decision as to what is permanent and what isn't. All right? Would we want to have a qualifying period before we make people permanent? That's also one to consider. I don't know, Gabby, if you want to say.
Yeah, I think also from the perspective of being able to attract talent, I know that some people are sort of discouraged when you mention fixed-term contracts, like the work, fixed-term contracts, because there's a strong preference for permanent contracts. And so sometimes you're not able to get the candidates that you would wish to have on board. But I think this is where your employer branding comes in, because you want to position yourself as such that candidates want to work with you in light of your values or some of the things you've done, not particularly in view of certain terms. And if you are very credible, you're offering fixed-term contracts, because one of the concerns with fixed-term contracts are, when my contract comes to an end, even though it says renewable, what are some of the decisions, the factors that would go into the decision making of renewing my contract? Am I out of a job within a year or so? But if you have established yourself as an employer of choice, or one that has credibility is one of its values, then it's easy to sell the fixed-term contracts or the other contracts that aren't permanent contracts. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I think the issue with the fixed-term contract is also the fact that it's just going on. So it may be a situation where you now need to consider, if someone has been on a fixed-term contract for, let's say, 3 years, what is the justification for keeping that contract going? I know a lot of it is like in situations like this, it's easier because to maybe do to terminate or vary those contracts. But that's the point you're making. Would I feel the job security and so on? But I think again, it will come back to the fact of how valuable that role is. And I think really employees are going to have to also be made to understand that there is going to be a change in the future of work on contracts.
Yes.
I mean, that is the fact of the matter, because the wahala we are in right now is serious, and it will be very shocking that employers will not make changes. You understand? In fact, right now we're varying to get through COVID-19, but after post-COVID, we have to re-engage and look at the contents of our contracts. Are you getting me? We may be able to change some things or add some things we may not be able to, but at least we know that the newer employees coming in will be able to issue out contracts that we want to use. So definitely there's going to be a change in the contract, definitely. Yeah. Okay. Is there any more questions? I think that was probably our last question that we had. Okay, great. All right. So thank you very much. You've spent a good time with us. What we're going to do before we close, I mean, Gabby, I think you wanted to talk to them about Africa Top Find, and then I'll close.
Just briefly, so further to the ways that OML and PMR can support you to implement some of these talent acquisition and management strategies. Africa Top Find is a service that both companies have come together to create. It's an exclusive recruitment service which is designed to appoint top-level candidates. So we are looking at C-suite and specialist executive roles or specialist management roles across sectors. So we look at all the processes from talent acquisition, we implement assessments, we design the entire selection process that is suitable for the type of role. Particularly in COVID times, things would also change a bit, so we would be there to support you to design one that would be able to help you to be efficient and also be compliant and get the best candidates. And also we move on to supporting you in talent management post the hire. So how are you managing the talent during probation period? How are you managing them post probation? What are some of the things that you can do to ensure that you have a 100% retention rate? So this service we have started, it's running in the UK and as well as Africa. So we're able to find top-level executives in Europe and in other parts of Africa for our clients. Yes.
Thank you, Gabby. Okay, so bringing us to a close, as I said at the beginning, we do have other webinars. Of course, you can attend the ones of interest to you. We are putting together resources as well that we want to share on some of these issues around terms, checklists, and also articles and guides based on our ground experience and also what other experts and other practitioners are also sharing with us. Following this webinar, we're going to put together the key actions and the key points and share them with you. That'll be emailed to you so that if you want to have a terms of reference, and we will also upload the webinar onto our YouTube and on the website if you want to go back and replay it to listen to some of the key points. And then, of course, a reminder that if you do need advisory services or anything, of course, you can get in touch with OML Africa. So on that basis, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you for spending time with us. And we hope that we've at least given you some insights in relation to some of the things that you need to be thinking about concerning managing your talents. So on that note, I'd like to thank Gabby. Gabby, thank you very much for your time with us. It's been really insightful. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. You're welcome. And I'd like to also thank all of you who took the time to also spend time with us. And we look forward to seeing you again at other webinars. Thank you very much and have a very good day and a very good afternoon. Thank you and goodbye.